We will get going. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back from your short break. Hopefully you got a little bit of fresh air. Hopefully wherever you are, it wasn't too stiflingly hot. Here in the UK, it's cool. Typical UK weather. We're back for our final session of the day. We are delighted for our keynote talk to have Luigi Colombo of SmartOdds talking to us. Luigi has a BSc in Statistics and Actuarial Science from University of Rome, La Sapienza, and a PhD in Actuarial Science from the Cass Business School. He was a visiting lecturer at the Cass Business School between 2004 and 2009, and he's been working with SmartOdds since 2005. I hope I've got all that right, Luigi, and you're going to talk on market efficiency in betting. And this session is about your talk, so I'm not going to take any more time away from your talk. So please do take away your presentation.
Thank you very much, James, and for the kind presentation. So first of all, well, hello everyone. I'll try to share my slides, and hopefully this is going to work well. Hopefully you can see the slides online, and
yep.
Good. And so I guess a fairly common note of warning or caution, and I hope everything goes smoothly. If my internet connection goes down, I'll cut the video off first. That might help. If not, I'll try to move on to my mobile data that sometimes seems to be working. The time is that my family and daughters are back from school, so they might start using the bandwidth. And but I guess I'm not the only one with this kind of problems. And so where shall I start? First of all, thanks for giving me the opportunity to be here today. My name is Luigi Colombo, work at SmartOdds. It's a consultancy and service provider. Specifically, we develop sports probabilistic models for betting purposes, but also for performance evaluation. We also develop trading software for market making, but also to visualize and interact with our models. We also have at SmartOdds a sort of operations department, which essentially focuses on gathering information and analyzing matches pre-match and post-match. As I said, the main application of our work is in the betting market and across a variety of sports. Football is the main one, but we also study US sports, tennis, cricket, golf, and a few others. In recent years, we also been focusing on reusing some of our models, but actually also developing specific ones for the purpose of performance evaluation of football players. That's because our owner also owns two football clubs, Brentford Football Club and FC Midtjylland in Denmark. The latter achieved second position last season in the Danish league, and the year before they won the league, and they also qualified for Champions League. I think this summer is going to be really tough for them to get into the Champions League, and I think they're starting from second qualifying round against Celtic, and then there is like another qualifying round, and then the playoff, and then assuming that they go through all of that, they will be Champions League. So good luck to them. It's not going to be easy. Talking about playoffs, Brentford actually gained access to the Premier League by winning the playoffs and just a few weeks ago. This is an incredible result, and at SmartOdds we are very, very proud of this achievement, and really happy. So this is going to be next season is going to be very interesting. Anyway, at the time when I was deciding the topic for this talk, was talking about beginning of March, Brentford was fourth in the championship, 3 points behind Watford and Swansea. And at SmartOdds, with our models, we thought Brentford had about 40% chance to make it in the top 2, which would have been very nice, and less than 2% chances of not making it into the playoff. So overall, give or take, we thought at the time that Brentford had a bit more than flip of a coin to make it to the Prem. So I didn't want to jinx it and decided to focus this talk onto something else. So I could have done actually something on Brentford. And in hindsight, that might have been quite interesting as well. So nonetheless, if at the end of this talk you got any questions on Brentford and Midtjylland, and particularly what the things that we do and how any of the things I talk about might fit into that, I'll be happy to answer some of those, or at least try to. So there you go. This is, as I said, a little bit about SmartOdds. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the sports analytics landscape. So coming from the industry, let's say finding a good topic to present here has been a bit of a challenge, I'll be quite frank. We do a lot of research on sports models, and I've been doing this for more than 15 years. And however, I've certainly been very economical in my interaction with the outside world. IP protection is obviously absolutely key for us. Our competitors are extremely good, and by default, we don't want to give anything away, even the smallest detail, really. And but nonetheless, we've been trying to interact outside of our company in some ways. We do have regular contacts with academia. Specifically, we collaborate with few universities, different capacities. We help with MSc projects, providing data where we can, ideas, some expertise and support. I also believe that one of our quants is involved with the RSS group on sports and statistics. We attend conferences, meetups, and occasionally speak and give a talk like today. There are obvious benefits in being more open. First and foremost, from my perspective, additional scrutiny of our own work is absolutely key to do good research. And if I could get far more feedback on the work that we do, that would be very, very valuable. Also, collaborations in less sensitive areas can still lead to generation of new ideas, innovations. And lastly, as a professional growth, so as quants, I think it's really important to have opportunity to grow professionally. What also I can say is that it is quite evident to everyone, and I think in particular in this audience, that over the last 2 decades, the field of sports analytics has developed from, let's say, a niche area of statistics to full mainstream research. These developments have certainly been facilitated by the collection of more and more granular data, by the availability of more powerful and faster computational capabilities, and very importantly, by advances in statistical techniques. And researchers have tackled really challenging issues, and this led to dissemination of really good ideas through the media, published journals, and conferences like this one. This is quite incredible, and it had a really profound effect on the betting markets, where at least anecdotal betting opportunities have become rarer, short-lived, and available for smaller stakes. Early markets have become far more accurate, and closing prices have become actually really difficult to beat. So I would say thanks to for all the excellent work that's been published in the last decade or so. As a measure of success, I can tell you that certainly made my job much, much harder, and I can see these quite often. So As I said, I want to talk about market efficiency, and with this incredible evolution of sports analytic world, and in the my quest for a suitable topic to talk about, I thought then I would actually focusing on measuring market efficiency over time. I know that there were a few sessions on this very topic this morning, or variations on this, and hopefully there is not going to be a lot of repetition here. I doubt that I will go anywhere near the level of sophistication presented, but hopefully I can provide a slightly different angle to the problem. So the question I'm interested in, are betting markets becoming more efficient? And the accepted wisdom is that as more players or gamblers, or whether recreational or not, join the market, those become more efficient. And so what I want to focus on is in particular the accuracy of the market, of the market prices. But there are obviously other aspects of efficiencies that would be interesting to investigate as well. Price formation and the price discovery mechanism, for example, is also very interesting. The existence of arbitrage or statistical arbitrage opportunities, but also the duration of perceived betting opportunities, and many other aspects. But for now, I'm just going to focus on the accuracy. So what's the motivation behind it? Well, in addition to general curiosity, because I actually think this is an interesting question anyway in its own merit, from a business strategy perspective, we need to understand the market in order to gain and maintain an edge. So trying to understand where the market is going, and how we need to adapt our business in order to continue to provide valuable service is quite important. But also from research management, my position has been as a head of quant for a few years, and while these days, admittedly, I don't do as much as I used to be. One of the key questions that we have is how much do our models need to improve in order to remain competitive? I've seen it, I've witnessed it firsthand, that when or if we stop research in a specific area, in a specific spot, inevitably the market catches up. And so we have to continue investing in research and development to maintain this edge. But what while this is, let's say, fairly generic statement, what is more interesting is can we try to actually measure how much do the model needs to improve and provide a clear target such that we have something to look for. And in practice, and I'm sure that many of you share this experience, you know, good ideas, no matter how good they are on paper, very often don't work. And it really takes quite a bit of time before you get a breakthrough. So the kind of research improvement tends to go very much like quite flat for a while, and then finally you get a major breakthrough, and then by iteration you can get few improvements, and then you wait for another breakthrough to be happening. But still having an understanding of where on average we need to be is quite important, and that's essentially what I'm going to try to do here today. And so the basic idea is quite simple. I want to fit a statistical model to a measure of accuracy and study its trend over time. So the plan for the rest of the talk is to first present the data that I collected from footballdata.co.uk, compute the market odds accuracy for the 1x2 market, and using the logarithmic scoring rule, then develop a simple smoothing model for this accuracy measure, make some adjustment to allow for changes in time and for shifts in the underlying probabilities, and then review the results and see how the market has improved. So this is the plan, and let's see if I can manage to explain it in a sufficiently clear way. So first of all, the data. This is all publicly available data. Probably many of you are very familiar with this data set. I used all the main competitions since 2003, home and away, full-time girls. The market data provides, I've been focusing on the 1x2 odds and using the average column. So I think those are familiar with it know that there's an average odds using Bet365 when that average is not available, and the BetBrain average when Bet365 is not available. I've been using the opening odds, which I think by their definition is about 24 hours to kick off. I removed matches without odds or results and those with odds less than 1. I think this error in the data, quite frankly, might be error in the data as well as errors in my parser. So there might very well be a coding error somewhere, but there still is about 112,000 matches that I have left in my data set across 18 competitions. And the only thing I've added is a really simple, really crude variable. Any match played since April 2020 is categorized as attendance affected as opposed to regular attendance for anything prior to that. The reason why I've chosen this is I do have actually data on how Opta in particular, I think, classifies a number of matches and what's the attendance. So I've got some information there, but I'm not really. I wasn't too interested in the specific impact of attendance of studying, how the attendance, and trying to explain it into detail. What I wanted to include is the fact that in the last year, football has been played a bit differently. And in particular, I think a year ago when all the teams came back, the way that they started playing was quite different. There were few changes to the rules, the 5 substitutions, for example. And all I wanted to do really is to say, actually, the last year, something substantial happened. Just let me make sure that I account for it in some way. So this is the data I'm using, and here are the observed frequencies. I'm pretty sure that this has been a topic today and possibly tomorrow. And according to this specific data set, in here I'm showing the percentage of the home win, the draw, and the away win on the right-hand side. 2 different columns. The one on the left is all the matches before April 2020. The column on the right affected is all the matches since April 2020. And we can see quite clearly a drop in the home win, the moves from the home team towards the away team with a really small change in the draw. Left-hand side on the pink column on the regular attendance, it's much wider, much larger than the number of games with affected attendance. And in here we can't quite tell whether the difference is significant. But as a byproduct of the work I'm going to do, we'll be able to at least answer that question in this context at least. And I guess these numbers here, or at least this histogram is quite, let's say, similar to what one would expect given what we have observed and noticed in the past year. And so that's the actual data. So what was observed in terms of frequencies of wins, draws, and away wins, and then market prediction. Nothing particularly sophisticated here. For each match in the data set, I got the 1x2 odds, and from this we can derive the market implied probabilities by inversion and by removing the overround. And as I'm sure most of you know, bookmakers apply a margin to the probabilities as a sort of premium for the risk that they take, and when they are betting and laying actions from the customers. The different formula to remove the in here, I assume that is spread proportionally across all the selections. In reality, there are several factors that determine where the bookie is loading its odds. It could be commercial reasons. They might want to attract certain customers in a certain area and maybe retain them. And risk management, they might actually have a big position on one side that they want to partially or completely offload. Trading for value, and if you have a fair value that you trust, you might actually want to build a big position, and this might be a reason why your odds or the odds of a specific bookies are skewed. I don't believe that the results that I'm going to present today are affected by the specific formula I'm using here, and so I'm just going to move forward. The overround itself is actually a measure of market efficiency, and in here merely as a sort of data check or sanity check, if you want. I just wanted to plot the VIG over time from 2003 to 2000 well, up until the end of the season, last season, for all of those competition, and this is across, as I said, various averages, so I'm not really looking in too much detail, and I think in order to study this more details, we'll have to look at the data by bookmaker and understand it a little bit better. All I wanted to do here is just to simply check that actually the VIG has been going down in time, but potentially in the last year there might have been an uptick. And as I said, I think this warrants a far more sophisticated analysis, so I'm not going to say much more about it without doing more work on this. But I thought it was interesting and a good sanity check on the data set. So in terms of measure of accuracy, I'm pretty sure this is a nice topic of discussions, and for this I'm going to use the logarithmic scoring rule. I define it in this case for a discrete random variable x with capital K possible outcomes, and given an estimated probability distribution p hat, the log score is defined as the logarithm of the probability assigned to the observed outcome, and here is the formula. This is the positively oriented, so the higher the probability assigned to the observed event, the higher the accuracy. And all of this is a long way to say that if we have a model, which we generally do, in this case the model is the market implied probability, we calculate its accuracy by taking the log of the probability of the home team winning if they won, of the draw if it was the match is a draw, or the away win probability if they won the game. So it's quite simple. And but if you allow me a brief detour on the log score, I just wanted to mention a couple of reasons why we use internally this metric quite extensively, although not exclusively, as part of our model analysis. Its expected value over usually unknown probabilities, in this case Q, is displayed in this slide, and it is proven that the expected accuracy then is maximized when the estimated probability distribution is equal to the true distribution. So if we're trying to select a model or tune a model, calibrate a model, and in that process we try to maximize this measure, we should tend towards the true distribution. It has a central role in information theory, in particular the relationship with Shannon entropy, the KL divergence, relative entropy. I think this is it gives this measure quite a solid, let's say, mathematical background as well as information theoretical background, and it is used extensively in the literature. Also goes under different names. It's negative. It's known as, I think, ignorance and surprise, and it is quite well used in the literature. But the additional factor I wanted to mention is that when using this measure for, as I say, model selection or fitting or calibration, ranking by log score is equivalent to ranking by exponential growth of capital. So essentially, instead of selecting a model because it has a higher, let's say, betting return when using a Kelly staking criterion, we can just use the log score, and the ranking would be the same. I think this is true only under some specific conditions, like the odds must be fair, and there are a few other caveats. But the general principle is this interesting link between betting P&L and the log score, which makes it, let's say, desirable certainly from my perspective. Enough about the detour on the log score. I'm sure that's a topic we could spend absolute hours on it. And so I want to just get back to analyzing the market accuracy in the 1x2 markets. In practice, we don't have the true distribution. We don't know it. In fact, we only observe a finite number of matches, and actually each of them have different 1x2 probabilities. And but for the purpose of this analysis, I just want to investigate the market accuracy over time. And so what I want to do now is to introduce a simple, smooth model for the observed log score and start fitting it. And there you go. So in order to do this, here is my simple model. So the observation YIT is the log score of match I played at time T by the is the log score of the probability implied by the odds. So again, take a football match, 1x2 odds, turn them into implied probabilities, and then take the logarithm of the probability of the event that actually happened. So these are my observations, and whereas the linear response is a function of various aspects. So in particular, 3 components. I've got a component that depends on time, this function ft, and as well as the attendance. So nu is a factor that can be equal to either regular or affected according to whether the match was played before or after April 2020. Then there is a coefficient beta that captures the impact of the attendance in a specific game I, so a sort of shift coefficient, and then an offset value that is there to adjust for changes in the underlying probabilities. And this is needed because the underlying frequencies of home win, draw, and away, the change in time. On average, they do change in time. And without such an offset, it is quite possible that the actual accuracy improvement that we observe in the observation on average actually confounded by the changes over time of the underlying probabilities. So, for example, if a home team starts, on average, they start winning less often, that will have an impact on the log score, but not necessarily on the accuracy of the forecast. So I just want to illustrate this with the toy example, which has got very little to do with the model itself, but just to actually illustrate this point. Let's consider a really simple game with 3 possible outcomes and a set of known probabilities. Let's call this game 1. Probabilities for the 3 outcomes are 0.45, 0.27, 0.28. If they look familiar, it's because they resemble historical 1x2 frequencies. So if I calculate the log score of this, so let's assume that we knew these probabilities and we used them to predict the outcome of this game the log score, the expected log score, is equal to minus 1.067. Now let's consider another game, game 2, where the probabilities are a little bit different, where the three outcomes have probability 0.41, 0.27, and 0.32. And again, if we were playing this game knowing the probabilities, the log score, the expected log score would be minus 1.083. Now, if we were to play game 1 first and game 2 second, there would be an apparent drop in accuracy if we use this specific measure. And when really this drop in accuracy is just due to the shift to a different set of underlying probabilities. And this is exactly what happened during the pandemic. Okay? And this is why I propose we do something, in particular introducing an offset to adjust for this. Note that this is a common issue across all the sports. So not only the behind closed door effect, but other things that come to mind are, for example, in NBA, team strategy changed quite a lot in the past few years. They're looking to attempt many more 3-pointers. That has increased the number of points, and actually the underlying distribution has become quite a bit different. Tennis tournaments, they started changing the scoring system, whether it's because of TV rights to make it more appealing to TV. The fact is that there is a change in distribution that might have actually changed in the scoring system that might actually help either the favorite or the underdog. It doesn't matter, but on average has a well-defined shift in the underlying probability. So yeah, this is simple. Tony example, just to illustrate the point of why I think we need something in our model to address. So let's go back to the linear response, and in here I've got, as I say, these three components. For a second, I want to focus exclusively on the p hats on this smooth. On this offset. What I'm going to use for this is a multinomial model, and in here the probability for each outcome are computed using the standard transformation and the linear predictors. Again, it depends on a number of parameters. So in here I'm modeling the 1x2 frequency. The linear predictor here depends on a coefficient, which is beta j specific of the outcome. Then the type of attendance, so beta nu. This is going to allow a shift in probability according to the game being regular attendance or affected. And then another function, maybe I should have used a different letter, ft nu. And so that depends on both time and again attendance. What does it mean in practice? In practice, it means in this multinomial model we allow the probabilities for 1x2 to change, to be shifted according to the type of attendance. We allow them to move over time in a certain direction, and this slope can be different for regular games and for affected games. So that could be they could be moving in different directions. This is what we allow to do. We use, I'm going to use here a spline from the MGCV package in R and to capture the time dynamic. So basically the function ft nu is actually, I'm going to implement it and use the function spline in R. The result of the regression, well, first of all, apologies. I always find in presenting these results really difficult. There's a lot of numbers, lots of figures saying that, and it's easy, the first reaction, and not really to point out what's going on. And so I'll just try to give a brief explanation of what I think are the key takeaways here. So the increase in probabilities due to the attendance being affected or not. So this, in particular, this shift, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the draw intercept, the attendance affected intercept, and away attendance affected is everything is significant, but the draw attendance affected. What it means in here is that while the draw probability somewhat changed during the last year, this doesn't seem to be significantly different from previous draw frequencies. And whereas for the away win probability, there seems to have been a significant impact. And then the numbers below in here, we're actually looking at the results for the spline, for the time trend. And in this case, what we can see is that only one of them appears to be significant. And in this case, significant means significantly different from flat line. And so it looks like the away win probability has been moving somewhat significantly prior to the pandemic, and then during the pandemic, everything else seems to have been fairly flat. That doesn't mean that there is no signal in that. It simply means that we're not able to capture it with this model. If I look at, if I actually display these results, that might actually help also seeing where we're going with this model. So at the very top, there is a long blue line that shows the home win probability decreasing in time, and then having a big shift downwards, and which is, by the way, of the same magnitude of the frequencies that we have seen before. And now with this model, we can actually see that these changes are significant, and even by taking into account the time dynamics over the last 15 or 18 years. Same thing for the away win probability, the bottom figure, and the one in the middle is the draw probability. Actually, we still see some sort of trend in the plot, even though we believe that that's not significantly different from a flat line. I would say that the scale of the y-axis here is being very generous, and I think it's showing it far more pronounced than it really is. But what's interesting, though, is you can see the red line is a little bit different from the end tip of the blue line, but it's not significantly different. There's this big grey shaded area that's basically telling us it's well within the noise that we could observe. So that's the model that I fitted, and there's a lot of improvements that we can make here, but I'm just going to leave it here for now. And the one thing that I wanted to mention, though, is in here, this model is a smooth, meaning I can't use it for betting. It's cheating. It's using information from the future. We got leakage, and in fact, this is quite helpful because it allows the model to be somewhat correct in its estimation. It's using future information to smooth and brings it back in time, so to speak. So this is very good for understanding and explaining. It's obviously not usable for betting purposes. So, okay, it's a beautiful slide here. Just to say, this is what we've been talking about. We're talking about the p hat, which was a linear response. So it was at the end of this, in particular with no coefficient in front of it, meaning this is a pure offset that we just added in as it is. And so this is the model that now I'm going to estimate. I'm going to do something really similar. Again, the observation, the y, are the log score of the market implied probability. So I'm going to use again the spline from the MGCV package to capture the time dynamics, and again there is a coefficient that allows a shift in the accuracy. I think there was something else I wanted to say. Yes, in here as well, we allow the time dynamic to be different pre-pandemic and during pandemic. So again, we don't expect that the accuracy of the market to continue along the same trend, but that the slope can be completely different. And maybe I'll say something more about this later on. The results, again, another one of these very dry slides, but again, we can focus the attention on what is significant and what isn't, and it looks like, according to the results here, the regression finds that the affected attendance might not have a significant change on average in the market accuracy, and this is the parameter -14. It's kind of saying it was less efficient, however, maybe it was not significant. And the other thing that is maybe worth mentioning is that the intercept is positive, and I'll say something about it in the next slides. As far as the time dynamic goes, we have that the accuracy of the market during regular time had quite strong results there, showing a different from a flat line in dynamic, and then during the pandemic, when attendance was affected, and there is something that actually is maybe, strictly speaking, is not very significant, but there seems to be something in there. Again, I'm going to show here the visualization that maybe it can also help seeing where we're going with this, and looks like, right, sorry, it looks like the SmartOdds logo ended up on top of the two comments. So you can see here that according to this model, at least, the market accuracy has been improving in time, and beyond what was, let's say, explained by the changes in the underlying probability. So the blue line, the first part, is essentially what I would like my models to improve on average in order to maintain an edge against the market. And then what we can see in here is that during the pandemic, actually, it seems something that to me feels very, very intuitive. Right at the beginning, the market might have struggled, and we certainly found it challenging. And so I would actually say that while the average drop possibly was not significant according to the regression results, right at the beginning, this might have been actually quite noticeable. And then it looks like, it appears, the market has been catching up really, really quickly. And what we have now at the end of the last season seems to be pretty much in line. If we were able to extrapolate the previous trend, seems like it's got back to where it's expected to be. And that potentially suggests some extensions for this model where somehow we will have to add some sort of constraint that brings the market improvement back in line with the long-term trends that we were observing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this value here actually is positive. So what this means is that the market, which obviously adds match specific 1x2 probabilities, is more accurate than using average 1x2 probabilities, even though those are calculated with cheating, using information from the future. So even though the 1x2 that we are using that are correct in some sense, and but they are only depending on time and attendance, the market is obviously more efficient than that. So this brings me to the end of my talk, and I would say certainly there are lots of extensions, and a lot of these effects are for example, competition specific, and I ignored this in here. The multinomial model, as I said, depends exclusively on time and attendance, but I think actually here it would be quite interesting to add some a match specific component, some sort of random effect that can capture additional variability. And I would say actually one thing that I'm definitely ignoring in here is that it's not only the trend in the average probability that matters, but actually some leagues might have become, let's say, more or less competitive. And so it's quite possible that even though the average might stay constant, the variability on the day might be changing over time. And but in any case, I set out to establish whether the market has been getting more accurate, and then no surprise, this is what I find. And using an offset, though, I think this is a one way to adjust for the changes in underlying probabilities. And now I believe I've got at least a target, a measure of how quick models need to improve to maintain an edge. And this is the end of my talk, and that's my email. LinkedIn link is terrible, so I probably don't really need it there. But in case you want to connect to LinkedIn, by any means, do so. That's my email. If there is anything that you'd like to ask afterwards, or if you want to get in touch for any reason, feel free to contact me. And 45 minutes, 46.
Perfect timing, Luigi. Thank you very much indeed. That was a really, really very interesting talk. Any questions? Anybody have any questions they want to ask? Alan has his hand up first.
Yay. Yeah. Hi, Luigi. Nice to see you again after such a long time. Hope you're keeping well.
Hello. Hi, Alan. Good to see you.
Really interesting talk. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Bizarrely, I've got 3 undergraduate students that are doing a talk here tomorrow, and one of the things they're looking at is the impacts of COVID on market efficiency in football. So what you've been talking about today has been very sort of relevant and interesting to me. I don't know if any of those guys are here today, but if they're not, I'll be able to pass on some of the things. One of the things that the students identified, which I'd be interested in a comment on, you mentioned at the end there that it's sort of competition specific, these changes, and certainly we found that there's been a big impact on COVID on market efficiency in a lot of leagues, but not in all. And it just seemed a bit odd as to why some countries seem to have had a different experience. And I just wondered, for example, you probably know, but Italy is it's very unusual, seems to have had a very unusual experience in this. So I just wondered if there are any particular countries that stood out for you as being quite different to the rest, and whether you found Italy to be an unusual sort of country like we did.
Yeah, no, very, very good question. And yes, I do believe that there are competition specific effects. I think Germany is another one that showed, if not necessarily the market, at the very most certainly the way that they play the game is kind of it was quite different. And Italy as well. What I would say is I actually noticed also a bit of a difference, not only within the country, but actually within the competition as well, with lower leagues, something a bit different from top leagues. And I wonder, I wonder why. I don't have that answer really, but certainly, and certainly what we have noticed is that teams adapted differently. So first and foremost, and here I've massively oversimplified in this model, but I do believe that the return, the end of not last season, the season before, the 2020, that was really, really peculiar. Like some teams came back with absolutely unfit. They didn't care at all. They just came back to end the season and tick in the box. other teams came back absolutely as if nothing happened. Super fit. They've been training a lot in the previous weeks, and you could tell the difference between in this. And we actually found that a lot of the, let's say, predictions prior to the pandemic, so before the lockdown, if we hadn't done anything, they were quite off, I would say, because really some teams just didn't turn up, and also I would say that's maybe more a personal opinion. I don't have a lot of data to back it up, but it seems to me that some players were not that keen in getting stuck in tackling and kind of social distancing football of some sort. And I think a lot of that came down again to the motivation that they had. And so that's the end of last season. This season has been a little bit different. Obviously, I think more those who want to study home advantage to an extent. Was very good data set because I think players and teams were all starting on an equal playing level field. They all knew that this was going to happen. The rules were let's say the same. Motivation was the same. So I think in that sense, I also think there is a bit of a distinction between the two aspects. And in here, I do allow for a tight dynamic, but other than that, probably should have done it. I could have done a bit more there.
Well, just as a little plug for my students for their talk tomorrow morning, that part of their talk involves actually looking at what actually happens to home advantage and what the different elements of a home advantage are pre and post COVID in terms of goal shots, fouls, penalties by the referee, penalty sanctions by the referee, etc. And they've got some interesting findings, which I don't want to reveal now because I'll steal their thunder. So.
Absolutely, don't, and I'm sure actually they've done a far more precise job than I've done in doing this.
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's all in the proceedings anyway. If anybody's desperate to find out, but
absolutely, I will definitely read that. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for that.
Thanks, Alan. Any more questions? You have Nicholas has a question.
Yeah. Hi, Luigi. How are you? Really interesting presentation. I had a question regarding what you said during the past minutes. When you had evaluated like the not the top leagues, but the ones that are like the ones that are below that, like for example the championship, did you see a particular like less efficiency, maybe because there are less maybe leagues with a lower number of volume in bets, or that depended on the league, or for example maybe the championship is consistently less efficient than the Premier League, or that's something that depending on the league or the country?
Yeah, and I think I don't have an answer. I only have an opinion on that. And certainly the size of the betting markets has an impact on these things. And I would say also when post lockdown, so immediately after the lockdown ended, also betting markets were quite small. It took some time to come back to bigger volumes. And in fairness, I would say that they have not fully recovered in some sense. So this is quite possible that the lower competitions might have actually had even less, might have been even less efficient because of less money going in, and therefore slightly less interest. But I am also thinking that a lot of that also comes down to, as I was saying before, how teams interpreted the game when they came back, and that probably had quite a big impact, not just on the efficiency, but just making the game much harder to predict, and so maybe lower competitions they had even more variability. In the last season, however, where I think things were a little bit more standard, I suspect that lower competitions might have been just a little bit more random. And I know you mentioned the championship, and Brentford played there for quite a few seasons, and that league is one of the toughest and most random leagues ever. It's like all the teams that seem to be in a very close range of, well, with the exception of the top and the bottom, everything else is quite very, very similar. Very difficult to establish the impact and the strength of each team in such a clear way. So I wonder whether just the fact that there is less variability in the abilities of the team that might actually have an impact in this, let's say, particular case. I'm not sure I'm answering that very well, but as I said, it's more of an opinion than a fact. I don't really know exactly why lower competitions somehow the markets seems to have struggled a little bit more than top competitions.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nicholas. Any more questions? Okay, well, I'm going to ask one. You've put a chart which I've kind of constructed myself a few times early on in your talk, where you the overrun or the VIG, where it's gone down over the years, but in the last year and a half, or no, a bit more than that, in the last almost 2 years, it's started to go back up again.
Yeah.
So, yep, that one there. And that's pre-COVID that started to go back up again. And I don't know whether you did you have any kind of, I'm sure you do, but maybe you don't necessarily want to tell us, but did you have any thoughts about why that began to tick up again in the last couple of years?
I have. I don't think I've looked into this data enough to have strong explanation based on this data. But to me, it seems like in here there is at the bottom, so say between 2012 to 2018, it looks like there is one or a set of competitions and one specific bookmaker that was really being very aggressive, and that potentially during COVID or even just before that, it started somehow stopped doing that level of really aggressive overrounds. So that's quite possible. But without looking at the data, I wouldn't know exactly what it is. And I thought this is interesting. I wish actually I had spent more time in looking into this. And then I think there is this theory, which I think would be interesting to prove somehow, is that obviously as the market becomes more and more efficient, there is a point where it actually is not convenient anymore to bet. So let's say I'm on the side of the gamblers, and if the market becomes perfect, then I'm only taking risk. It's only noise. So why am I doing that? That's not fun, really. And so at that point, I would drop out of the market or potentially go on to the other side and start bookmaking. Okay, and so at that point, as more and more, let's say, top efficient or top accurate players drop out of the market, you would expect the market to become less efficient and create some sort of cycle. I don't know whether this theory is true or not. I do know of major players in the market that moved onto the market making side of things, and so that might be let's say anecdotal evidence that some of this is happening. But I think that would be really interesting. But there might also be some other more simpler explanations. For example, a bookmaker going really aggressive, trying to get a big slice of the market and essentially going bust after that, or maybe getting that part of the market and then revert his odds back to more sustainable long term. And I guess this is quite common practice in many industries to do some sort of price war.
Yeah, that sounds those sound like convincing explanations to me. Thank you, Luigi. I think we've run right up to the end of our allotted time, so I think probably the best thing is just simply to say a big thank you, Luigi, People can either use the applause function in Teams, or you can do some old-fashioned applauding. But thank you very much, Luigi. That was a really, really interesting talk. All sorts of interesting thoughts and great data set, accessible, really interesting. So thank you very much for the time taken and for spending the time with us this evening.
Thank you for having me. And as I said, any questions or thoughts, feel free to write to me.
Great. Thanks, Luigi. And so that brings to the end our day. So thank you, those of you that have been with us the whole time. And we will be back again at 9:30 tomorrow morning, UK time. And depending on what it is for you, whatever part of the world you're in, we'll have parallel sessions first thing tomorrow morning. We'll have a session in the main room on tennis and a session on performance analysis in our secondary parallel session. So that's tomorrow morning, 9:30. I will resend links via email if you've registered for the conference, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you very much.